Well, as I've said before, folks, I don't want to quote these Bible verses or read them to you. I want to give you the location, and I want you to write them down and look them up yourself. So if you'll pause your machine for a minute and get your pencil and your pad and sit down and write these down so that you can look at the influence of these scriptures, 7 of them, on what I'm going to say in the next 15 minutes. The first one is in Genesis chapter 18, chapter 20, verses 19 through 26. And the next one is New Testament, which is Matthew 5 and verse 13. The third, number 3, is Matthew 5, 14 and 15. And the fourth one is in John 12 and 35. And the fifth one is back in the Old Testament in Deuteronomy 28 and 13. And Deuteronomy 28, 43 and 48. And then in Judges 2 and 20 and 22. Now, I did an excerpt earlier this week that actually used this same group of scriptures for what it was saying. So sometimes we find a route, like Route 95 goes a certain way, and you know that. And you can go both directions on it. But sometimes the information going to a town is a little different than coming back. Well, that's the way the Bible is. The information is a little different sometimes in one book than it is in the other, the same information. So we have lost our effective Christianity. Why? Because the understanding humanist knows that we have lost the influence in spiritual realms today because we've allowed the world and humanism to come in to it. And it's amazing that I'm on this one right here, and I talked about Sodom and Gomorrah in the last excerpt, and I wasn't here at this one yet. In one sense, Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed because of the wickedness of the Sodomites. They were destroyed because the lack of righteous people. God promised to save the city if they could only find 10 righteous people. God would have saved that city. But he destroyed it because they couldn't find 10 righteous people. Our Lord taught that Christians are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. They are severe consequences if we become non-effective. So it's important that we watch out for our life. Ineffective Christians are good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden underfoot of men. Ineffective Christians deny the word of needed light. Ye are the light of the world. It giveth light to all that are in the house, wherein our light is hidden. Our world stumbles in darkness. For he that walketh in darkness knoweth not whither he goeth. Man, do we have a lot of people who today who call themselves Christian, but have no Christian proof. You've got to have proof if you're a Christian. You've got to have as much proof as you're a Christian as I have, that I can sit here and say, I am a white man. I have the proof, the evidence. You see me. I am a white person. Whiter than most people because I have a disease called pigmentation, white pigmentation. So I am a white man. I can prove that. And I am a Christian. I can prove that just as easy as I can prove I'm a white man. When people meet me, they know they met a Christian. I'll make sure of that. How God chastens ineffective Christians is another whole matter. Whenever God's people turn from His truth and become ineffective, He chastens them by raising up a heathen power to rule over them. In our day, God has allowed the humanist to be raised up to oppress the Christian because we have turned from His ways. That's what those scriptures I gave you a little while ago are about. You must look them up. God promises his people that if they would obey his ways, he would honor them and cause them to rule over their enemies. And the Lord shall make thee the head and not the tail. Whew! That is a good statement. And thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath, if that thou hearken unto the commandments of the Lord thy God, which I command thee this day to observe and to do them. If on the other hand they reject his commandments, he promised this: the stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee. Do you know, respectfully speaking, that the children of Israel, who were God's chosen people, came under evil powers of different nations? Many times they became servitude to them. Remember, they were in Egypt 400 years while they were growing to 200,000 strong. They went in there as 70 children, of God's children, and they came out 200,000 strong. But they still didn't follow God. These warnings were repeatedly fulfilled throughout the history of Israel. God's people forsook his way, followed after the sensational practice of other nations. God's anger was therefore turned against his people, and he used the heathen powers whom they copied to rule over them. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he said, because that this people hath transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and have not hearkened unto my voice, I also will not henceforth drive out any before them of the nations which Joshua left when he died, that through them I may prove Israel whether they will keep the way of the Lord to walk therein, as their fathers did keep it or not. Again and again God gave his people under the hand of their enemy, until they cried out to him and returned to his way, and then he delivered them. Revival occurs when Christian influences the world. Apostasy occurs when the world influences the Christian. The influence of the world is amazingly subtle, but very effective. It causes the love of Christians to slowly cool toward the Lord as they gradually conform to the ways of the world. That is an ineffective Christian. One who lives in the ways of the world. He is an ineffective Christian. And God does not like that at all. He's not pleased with that. Well, our time's come and gone. We'll see you next time. Right. Bye-bye.